live.
Yes.
Mr. Vice President, that's why I was talking. If we are live, I won't be talking. I'll shut myself up. I'll mute myself.
All right, you are now live.
Well, that's unambiguous, isn't it? All right. Hello, everybody. I'll call the meeting to order now. Just quickly introduce myself. You haven't always heard so much from me, but I am David Foster. I'm the vice chair, and in Tony Blowen's absence this evening, I will be chairing the meeting. I'll start with the land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. We'll now proceed with everybody. I think everybody has their camera on already, which is fantastic, but we'll proceed with introductions. I'll call your name and ask that you unmute your microphone and just introduce yourself briefly. I'll also just mention that I am coming to you from Caribou Provincial Park near Pictou, and am doing so over a cell phone connection. So hopefully it remains steady throughout. If there are any connection issues, then Elizabeth McDonald will take care of making sure that the meeting continues to flow in my absence. So with that, I will ask that you please unmute yourself and introduce yourself when I call your name. And so first we have Rebecca Parker. I don't think Rebecca is in the meeting.
Becca is in the meeting. Oh, wait. She was in the meeting.
Okay. We will circle back to Rebecca Parker. Perhaps they'll be able to rejoin us. Next, Mimi O'Handley.
Hi, folks. I think when I signed in, my name came up as Rebecca Parker, and I'm not sure why.
That was me. I'm sorry. I thought it just came up as coordinator, main account, and I, for some reason, thought that was Rebecca Parker. So Rebecca Parker was not in the meeting earlier.
Yeah, just me.
Clarify.
And please, if I mispronounce anybody's names, please correct me so that it's used correctly through the rest of the meeting. Next, we have Stu Campana.
Hello, I'm Stu. I'm currently the Director of Sustainability at Chorus Aviation and calling in from Guysborough, Nova Scotia today.
Thank you very much, Stu. Next, we have Martin Willison.
I'm Martin Willison. I'm a retired professor of biology and environmental studies at Dalhousie University.
Thank you, Martin. Next, we have Shalom Mandeville.
My name is Shalom Mandeville. I have a background both in limnology and engineering, and I live at Maynard Lake. And one person came to my place a long time ago, along with Emma Waddy, when my group donated some of the equipment because we weren't using it. She was at St. Mary's then. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Shalom. Next, we have Susan Belford. I don't think that Susan is in the meeting.
Susan has not joined yet. I know she did say she was planning to join the meeting, so I'll keep an eye out to see if she joins.
Excellent, thank you. Next, we have Ahmad Al-Mawla.
Yeah, exactly. Ahmed Al-Mallah. Yeah, no worries. Actually, I know it's not easy name to pronounce, especially with the H in Arabic. It's different. So this is Ahmed, MASc graduate from Dalhousie University in Civil Engineering, and I am joining the call from Dalhousie itself.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Sayo Godet.
Yeah, I'm Sayo, retired federal public servant, 32 years in policy, economics, policy analysis, various positions, including Environment and Climate Change Canada, where I was the representative, Canada's representatives to the OECD working group on biodiversity, water, and ecosystems.
Excellent, thank you, Sayo. And finally, on the committee member side, we have Lindsay Bedard. I don't think Lindsay's on the meeting either.
She is not joined, no.
All right, we will see if she is able to join later. And I suppose I didn't introduce myself. Not only am I in Pictou right now, but I'm a PhD candidate at Dalhousie University studying forest management and hydrology in our drinking water supply for the majority of HRM residents, the Pockwalk watershed. We have received regrets from Tony Blowen, our chair. He is otherwise engaged this evening. And I think we typically go through the support staff as well, do we not, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Yeah. So first on my list, I have Emma Waddy, Manager of Environment.
Good evening, everyone. Hello.
Hi, Emma. Next, we have Elizabeth Montgomery.
Hi, everyone. I'm the Water Resources Specialist on the Environment and Climate Change team at HRM.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And our second Elizabeth McDonald, who has been fantastic throughout and is always there to make sure these things go smoothly.
Hello.
Hi, Elizabeth. Okay, so first we will have a look at the minutes from the last meeting. If everybody's hopefully had a chance to have a look at those, has anybody seen any errors or omissions from those minutes? Okay, hearing none, then I will call for a motion to approve the minutes as they are, requiring a mover and a seconder. Shalom, looks like you're moving. And Sayo to second. Okay, so that the minutes of June 8, 2023 be approved as circulated. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I suppose if we're all on camera, visually raising your hand is equivalent. Okay.
Yep, that's fine if you're on camera.
Excellent. And any opposed, say nay. Okay, hearing no one opposed, then the motion carries and the minutes are approved. Okay, next on our agenda is approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Elizabeth McDonald, are there any additions or deletions?
There are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
Excellent, thank you. So then I will call for a motion to approve the order of business, requiring a mover and a seconder. Ahmad and Sayo, I believe.
Yeah.
First and second. Okay. Excellent. So then all those in favor of the agenda as circulated, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, seeing none opposed, the motion carries and the agenda or the order of business is approved. I see no business arising out of the minutes. So we'll move on to call for declaration of conflict of interest. So if there are any committee members who feel that they have a conflict of interest to declare with any of the items in tonight's agenda, please speak now. Hearing none, then we can move on. If at any time you feel that there is a conflict of interest, please speak up and we can deal with that at that time. We will move on to consideration of deferred business, and I believe there is none. So continuing to move on to correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Was there any correspondence received?
There was no correspondence received by the clerk's office.
Excellent. So moving on to petitions. Any petitions
No
received?
petitions.
Okay. And are there any presentations?
There are no presentations.
No presentations. Oh, we are just cruising through this.
Mm-hmm.
I see no information items brought forward, and so we'll move on to item number 9. Our first item of substance under reports discussion, which is an update of the meeting with the province of Nova Scotia. And I'm not sure who's going to present that.
I am.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, so following up to the mapping discussion we've had at the past 2 meetings of this board, Emma Waddy and I met with representatives of the province of Nova Scotia with your concerns. And I think in general, they were in agreement that the mapping could, like the interactive mapping, could be updated and more accessible as the board identified. And so we met with the manager of surface water over at the province, and she took our notes. She said that there's been some discussion internally about how to make better interactive mapping, and they definitely took our note that we'd like some sort of, this board wanted some sort of public feedback option, where if you notice that there were inconsistencies in the mapping, especially the interactive mapping, that those could be addressed. Because I think, you know, especially like Martin, as you were saying, the level of granularity that folks know on the ground versus the level of granularity that someone doing a survey off LiDAR data could know, there's obviously a big gap there. So they took our notes. They seemed really open to making these improvements, but the person who does this work has been off on leave, and so they come back this month, before the end of this month. And this is, I just received confirmation from this manager of from the manager of water at the province that this is at the top, one of the things on the top of her list that they'll be addressing is how to improve that. And also the notes that were made, I don't remember from who, but someone on this board, that the interactive mapping on the province's open data, it's not that bad on a desktop computer, but accessing it on a tablet or on a phone isn't really that user friendly. It's not as accessible. And also, you know, I spent some time just trying to find this mapping on Google, and it's not easy to find. And so we made all those notes to the province and they were taken. So I don't have any updates on any action that was taken, because the GIS person or the mapping person who would be doing all these updates they've just been off on leave, but they'll be back. And this is something that was stated that they're going to be working on. So we're in touch with these folks at the province fairly regularly, as you know, as we get an update from them once they've had this discussion and this person is back. Like, we can either, you know, report at the next meeting, or you know, send a correspondence around if we don't want to wait that long. But it felt like a productive discussion, and they acknowledged that it was, you know, clearly their role to make these updates. I think as far as the mapping PDF, I think that I don't know that will be updated as regularly, but I hope, and you know, let me know what you think when I'm finished here. But if the interactive mapping is updated more regularly, if there's an opportunity for feedback, and if it's a lot easier for folks to find on the internet, and it's accessible, you know, through a phone and through a tablet, because not everybody's looking at a computer screen, I hope that meets the outcomes and like the issues that you address to some extent. But happy to take more feedback and you know, bring it back to those folks if it doesn't.
Thank you very much for your report, Elizabeth. I'm gratified that you've had this discussion, and I think we're moving in the right direction. So that's very good. I have also come across a volunteer who is an excellent map maker, who has said that he would try figuring out one watershed at least and see what he can do using the methods that are available. So that will be useful for my purpose. And once we've got something there, if we get something there, then I can forward that as a piece of information to show you what's available. I've also spoken with somebody working for, I forget the name of the company that produces the mapping software. I spoke with an ex-student of mine who works for the company, who said that indeed it is possible, perfectly possible, to automate this and get much better results than we have at the moment. However, it's not necessarily an easy thing to do, certainly not something, and it would require expertise. And not only that, it is also dependent on the specific software that's available. Mm-hmm. So let's move ahead with this. And as I say, I'm pleased. I think we're going in the right direction, and I'm delighted that this discussion has begun. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you're happy. I think too, like, they really did seem to take the note about having an opportunity for public feedback. So, you know, if you do get this map developed and you're able and willing to share it with us, we could also forward it to the province, and perhaps they would be able to incorporate that as part of their updates as well. But I think, you know, they did really seem to take our notes. How quickly this will all move is another thing, of course, but it was certainly like a productive discussion, I felt.
Super, thank you.
Thank you very much for the update on that. That does sound like fantastic progress on it. And building on what you just mentioned there, these processes do take a while, and so certainly open up the floor to any further discussion or questions for staff or between members. But my 2 cents would be that, as indicated, it seems that the ball is rolling on this, and I wouldn't want to push it too hard in terms of pace, because there is a natural pace of these sorts of things, and I wouldn't want to upset that. But I think it's important that we maintain a stewardship of this throughout, and hopefully continue to provide feedback that would be helpful. Shalom, did I see your hand up there?
Yes, I want to ask Elizabeth Montgomery, the person you were talking with, is that Elizabeth Kennedy?
So she's the director. We were speaking with Krista, and I'm going to perhaps incorrectly say her last name, but I think it's Montroy.
Okay.
So she's she's in Elizabeth Kennedy's department, but Elizabeth Kennedy's the director and Krista's the manager, I believe, of surface water.
Yeah, the reason I asked is that I've had a very good liaison with Elizabeth Kennedy. That's why I asked. Thank you.
Yeah, we generally have like a good working relationship with that office. So, you know, it's helpful for having these discussions for sure.
Just as a tidbit, Cameron, who used to be with HRM, it reports to Elizabeth now, because I've been dealing with Cameron lately.
Cameron gets a lot of emails from me for sure.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions, comments, concerns? I'll ask a quick one. Do you see, because these folks are involved in surface waters, and given the last eventful few weeks we've had, and this will come up in our next agenda item, but do we anticipate that this process may be affected in terms of pace, availability of staff, interest, because of sort of recent events?
I don't know, to be honest. I did see that they've posted at the province for a stormwater flooding position. So I mean, I could certainly ask, but I don't know how the division of work is split up in that department. So whether, you know, this is a GIS person and a mapping specialist who would be doing this work, and I'm not sure if that would be the same person working on like updated mapping for flood responses or not. Sure. I mean, I imagine the department is quite busy with all that work, but I don't know specifically. Emma, okay. Did you have any more insight? No, yeah. And on our end, we're really just asking questions. So I think from our end, I don't think flood response would affect the pace of this work, really.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions or comments from any of the members of the board? All right. Well, then seeing none, thank you very much for the update. And I believe that concludes this item for the agenda. And we will move on to the next item, which is on the flood mapping. And I believe that Emma Waddy, are you speaking to this?
I am. Yep. So David, do you want to preface it? I think you brought it forward.
Yeah, so I did request an update from staff pertaining to, and this was prior to last weekend's additional flooding. After the 200 plus millimeters in some areas, there was the municipality responded in terms of resources and recovery and whatnot. I was specifically, my interest was piqued by a comment made by Erica Fleck, I believe, chief of emergency management. Probably your title's wrong there, but she made a comment to media that the level, I believe it was specifically in reference to the effects of it, not necessarily the actual precipitation, but the effects were in line with a 1 in 1,000 year storm. And that immediately piqued my interest. And so I was wondering if staff had a response to that or could provide any further information that would clarify the classification of that storm as a 1 in 1,000. So that was kind of the background. Thank you.
Great, thanks, David. Yeah, so we did work closely with our colleagues in a smaller team called the Resilient Infrastructure Standards team, and they are a group of stormwater engineers, specialists, and they were able to do some mapping, some very preliminary mapping and modeling based on the events of that July 21st, 20th, that, I forget what the exact dates were, but that in the 20th of July rainstorm event that we had. And they found that it was based on previous models of the Sackville River. And again, this is very preliminary and very much using data from rain gauges in the area, that it was a 1 in 1,000 level event. So it also kind of caught me off guard too. But looking at the modeling, it is based on the preliminary data, an accurate statement to say it was a really extensive amount. And I think the piece that was very much in like the reason that made it that was just the short duration of the event with like how much we got in that short timeline. So yeah, that's basically where that value came from. You're muted, David.
Thank you. The phone is a different interface. Thank you for that. And the reason that it piqued my interest was because, especially in the context of what followed 2 weeks later, which was not the same duration, but was of similar intensity, I believe. Characterizing a storm as 1 in 1,000 has very strong implications from a public perception standpoint. And something that I noticed in the immediate follow-up of that comment from Ms. Fleck was that it was, hello?
Yeah, you're still there.
Oh, sorry. Something that I noticed in the immediate aftermath of that comment was that it was immediately glommed onto by media. It was picked up by international media, and it was being reported even in the United States that this was a 1 in 1,000. And my concern with characterizing anything as that, and not making any assertions as to whether or not it was, is that when we characterize something as 1 in 1,000, it's a fluke. And the average person is not going to interpret that as something that we need to take seriously as a possibility for the future. And so I think that there's implications, as far as characterizing something like that. And I worry about the precedent that it sets in terms of our expectation for future stormwater events. And then we saw 2 weeks later a similar intensity, shorter duration event that had, in some areas, similar effects. So I don't know if staff wanted to respond to that, if there's any comments or questions from other members of the board.
David, if I could jump in, I feel that you put your finger on an important point here. And I agree that I'm skeptical and I'm perfectly willing to accept that existing modeling puts this as a 1 in 1,000 year storm. However, the existing modeling is therefore very probably completely out of date. And it's reminiscent of our mapping, which is also completely out of date. So in all likelihood, we can see things move forward, and it will be seen soon as not a 1 in 1,000 year event, but a 1 in 10 year event, which is what I think is probably more accurate.
Thank you, Martin. I see your hand up, Sayo. Or is there a response from staff on any points brought up by Martin? Sorry, Sayo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the important thing we have to keep in mind is that our climate's changing quickly, and as you mentioned, Martin, and also with increased intensity, you're right that things are changing, and it's like this is based off the modeling we have currently, and it's something we are actively talking about with our colleagues and various other departments about how to most accurately prepare for this kind of increased storming events that we're going to be having in the coming years. And we've already had a much rainier summer this year than we've had in other years as well. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Sayo, sorry.
Yeah, well, if that modeling was done on a historical basis, then it cannot be taking into account the changed circumstances in the environment, in the atmosphere. The climate is changing. We're seeing that everywhere. We're seeing wildfires. We're seeing all over the world. We've seen atmospheric rivers in British Columbia. And now we had our own little, whatever it was called, a chain of storms. I heard one time macroeconomic forecasting being referred to as trying to drive by looking in the rearview mirror. I would say that this is an example of that. It's also, that was a statement from the provincial government, was it? Just to confirm, was that a statement from the provincial government, the one in the 1,000?
The one in one
city. It was the city ZMO.
It was
the
a city.
HRM ZMO. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hate to say it, but I think it's true. When you say things like that, it means there's nothing we need to do to prepare for the next one. We don't need to harden our flood defenses. We don't need to build better bridges that won't wash away. We don't need to do anything because, hey, none of us are going to be here in 1,000 years. So it's an excuse to do nothing. It's based on, I think, very bad analysis, probably even worse if it's preliminary. But I would strongly urge us not to try to drive just looking in the rearview mirror. We need to look ahead and understand what climate change is doing.
Definitely. And like I should say, sorry, David.
No,
I should say too that we are, like I said, like actively working with our colleagues and the stormwater resilient infrastructure standards team to update this information. Because like you said, this is not going to just be a one-off event. Most likely, like we need to be prepared for future events and make sure we are prepared for them to happen more frequently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that. I believe I see Shalom's hand up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair. I just want to, I'm disappointed you jumped the gun on me. That's what I was going to mention too. It's a fire department. It's by the way, I have a background in stormwater because I did master's course under Dr. Waller, who was the one who set up the Center for Water Resource Studies. So I've done this programming. I think it's more than 1% probability, which will be 1 in 100 year. Long time ago, Mr. Vice Chairman, you got that email from me where I gave my previous history, remember? And which I sent to Elizabeth McDonald. I used to be chairman of Sackville Rivers Advisory Board, not the association, but the advisory board in the county. And we were very concerned about, what is that street in Bedford? It'll come to me in a minute. And recently, Walter Regan also got into the media, said that. I agree with Walter. For people who don't know, Walter has been activist for a long time from the Rivers Association. He said somebody should buy up those properties because, it's very shame that they get flooded, even in small floods. And secondly, I do have a beef with that shopping center in Bedford. When I was the chairman of Sackville Rivers Association, we actually foresaw that problem. I'm not trying to promote myself because I'm not applying for a job, but we foresaw that. And we felt that shopping centers should not have been built because many people who have stores there complained. I know the consultant who did this. I'm not going to use a name because this is a public thing. I just want to let you know. And what Walter Regan said, I strongly support that. And anyway, I have a question to Emma Waddy, since you are the manager. I know you are not in that stormwater thing, but still, you are the official representative. Do you see down the road at Chatham buying those properties? Oh yeah, Union Street. I remember now, Union Street. Do you see that happening?
not sure what's going to happen. I will say that we are having active conversations about the modeling for the Sackville River, that like this flood mapping that was presented, I think in 2018. And like I mentioned, we're updating, and that we are working on preparing our municipality for climate change. You know, we have adaptation specialists on our team. This is like an active conversation that we talk about daily. In terms of purchasing the properties, I think that would have to be like a multi-jurisdictional conversation. I grew up, I feel like every time I talk about flooding, I mentioned that I grew up in New Brunswick on the St. John River, which it's like I'm very aware of flooding and the changes in communities that can happen. And I saw my hometown change drastically over the years because of multiple flooding events. And I believe my understanding in New Brunswick was that it was a provincial buyout, that people were basically given money to move their houses if they could, or were kind of bought out of their homes kind of thing. So that we would have to be working with the Nova Scotia government to understand like how we could, what that could even potentially look like here in a much more urbanized area.
Emma, what was I going to ask you? Something. Oh yeah, there was a previous flood mapping done by Environment Canada, you know, on the main river, because it was submitted to the board, Sackville Rivers Advisory Board. By the way, that board was shut down after amalgamation, and there was another thing. So there have been a lot of discussion over the years. And finally, I want to say, I really like what his worship said, Mayor Savage, and I watched him for hours on CTV National News. See, I'm single, so I got lots of time. So I watched him and he was very depressed. Do you know what he called that floods in HRM? He called that the Old Testament flood. It was very, very appropriate. You know, the flood in the Old Testament. That's all I would say. I'm a strong supporter of the mayor, by the way. So,
thank you for that, Shalom. I will mention though that's another reference where, just like 1 in 1,000, saying that it's Old Testament sets the expectation that this is something that doesn't happen very often. Old Testament times. I'm no biblical scholar, but that was a very long time ago. So to points brought up by a couple people, we might need to expect those a little more regularly. Emma, you mentioned something that I'm interested if you can provide a little bit more, and you mentioned multi-jurisdictional, and I'm wondering if the province is involved in the updating of this flood mapping, and if resources at Environment Climate Change Canada have been tapped as well.
So not to my knowledge. That doesn't mean they haven't been involved, because, you know, HRM is a large organization. So I'm sure that they have been involved to an extent. It's just not in conversations I have been part of. When I mentioned the multi-jurisdictional, I meant more in terms of like the response of like planning for the area moving forward. In terms of the mapping, I think that's something at this point we're able, because of various capacities that we have now, which we didn't have 5 years ago, we're able to do that mapping in-house.
Okay. Are there any other questions, comments from members? Shalom, I believe I see your hand up again.
And I can easily send him an email, but we did discuss this with Elizabeth McDonald. In the next meeting, it'll be nice if we meet earlier, because it's nice if everybody introduces themselves and given, let's say, 5 minutes, like a bio on them, because I like to know other people here, because, for example, Mimi did very good work. I've read some of her reports. So I like to know other people. You know, I know most of the people, by the way. And it'll be nice if we do that.
Okay, perhaps we can bring that up again, number 11 on the agenda when we discuss the next meeting.
Okay, I'll
but are there any? Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for the current item at hand? Okay, I don't see any hands up. I will, as the person who brought this request up, This is something that is of interest to me personally, and I think that within the purvey of the Watersheds Board, I think it's very interesting, and I would personally like to continue to be apprised of how this is going. And I'm also a big advocate of let's learn as much as possible. I wonder if, in the interest of sharing information and learning from as many sources as possible, if it might be of interest to other members of the board to bring in an expert from outside of HRM who might have experience in this area and might bring a different perspective. And the background to that comment and suggestion is a conversation with my academic supervisor, Rob Jameson, who himself is familiar with this, though defers to colleagues at other levels. In fact, there were I don't know, I can't remember who he mentioned, but there are some folks, especially at Environment and Climate Change Canada, who've been tracking some of the floodplain work in Sackville and were involved and interested in the development of the IDF curves for the area. And I'm wondering if that might be something that would be interesting to hear more of in terms of how do we try and anticipate climate change as best as possible, even if we don't have the historic data.
David, if there was someone that you had in mind to come and present, if you wanted to send me an email afterwards, or you could send everyone an email just listing some names or ideas, we could definitely look into that. And through the clerk's office, we reach out to that person.
Perfect. Thank you. I did want to judge interest from the members of the board to make sure this isn't just a personal, an item of personal interest. Sayo, your hand is up.
Yeah. Is my microphone on? Yes, it is. So just wanted to, in the same spirit as driving by looking through the windshield rather than the rear view mirror, there's all kinds of development projects in Nova Scotia. To what extent are those vulnerable to a quote unquote 1,000-year flood? Because, we don't want to repeat problems that can be anticipated. So, are we looking out for that as well?
The municipality, like Emma said, is working on flood risk mapping for the entire municipality. And it is considering the effects of climate change. We are increasing our projections, on top of the historical data we have to do that mapping, that flood risk mapping in the future. And our standards are to a 1 in 100-year flood, and it might be helpful. I wonder too, just based on the discussion here, if there's a public education piece that's missing, because you're right, 1 in 1,000 years sounds really catastrophic, but it's a way of stating a statistic. So I wonder if maybe part of the reason, I agree, it does sound like it's never going to happen, but maybe we can improve our general communications to explain what that means, so it doesn't sound so catastrophic, because it isn't a value judgment. I mean, I think as this group knows, but that mapping is happening, and it is considering the projections, climate projections as well.
Sayo, your hand is up.
Yeah, I guess my major point is that what we used to think as 1 in 100 years or 500 or 1,000, whatever, we don't know. We just don't know. So if it was 1 in 1,000, it may be now 1 in 10 at the extreme. So, will we permit people? The flood mapping, of course, differs. How big is the flood, right? I mean, where are you going to let people build depends on how big is the flood. So I think, I would suggest adding, being very conservative in the sense of, if you think it's 1 in 100 years, well, maybe, double that, whatever the height, the safe height is, and double it, or, because we don't know where we're going. And I think it will pay to be safe rather than end up in the same place and then have to face the issues like do we buy people out, or do we let them, or do we blame them for having built in a floodplain, which is one possible policy response. But if we don't talk about what the scenarios are, then we can't talk about what the policy responses ought to be.
Yes, it sounds like the sort of foundation to a lot of this discussion is having a better understanding of what to expect. How realistic are these curves? What are they based on? And what weight should they be given in a changing climate? So that's my my drive, or my rationale for suggesting and some more information from an outside. I don't have anybody in mind, but I will look into it and get back to you, Elizabeth McDonald.
Sounds good.
Shalom, your hand is up.
And Mr. Vice Chairman, did you say you're a student of Professor Rob Jamieson?
I am.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know him from the old days. His predecessor is Professor Jack Burney, who used to teach, and he's a member of my group. But anyway, I just want to mention about, I'm listening to everybody. 1 in 100 years doesn't mean that it'll take 100 years to come. The way Dr. Waller taught us, he used to specialize. He died a few years ago. By the way, he was a member of my group as well. We have a lot of members. He said 1 in 100 year means 1% probability in any 1 year. So it can occur more than once in 100 years, but it's 1% probability. I don't know how Professor Jamieson is teaching, but that's what Dr. Waller used to teach. And Professor Jamieson would know Dr. Waller because Dr. Waller is the one who set up CWRS, Center Water Resource Studies. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for that, Shalom. I had better be careful how I represent the teachings of Dr. Jamieson, as who knows, he might be watching. This is public. And he is my supervisor and will be grading a thesis hopefully soon. But I'll look into that. But that does bring up an interesting point, Shalom. You're right. And sort of my win vein of perhaps what the average person might understand about these matters is my own family. And in talking with them, there is definitely the misunderstanding that a 1 in 100 will happen only every 100 years. And so if it happens, then it should be good for 100 years. so there's a misconception about this in the public. And so what you were mentioning, Emma, about perhaps refining communications about these, I think that's absolutely spot on. So I will look into this. If there's any other comments or questions from members of the board, then we can continue with that or move on to the next. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. And I do not believe there are any added items. So we move on to our final substantive piece, and that is the date of the next meeting. That is currently set on October 12th, 2023. Is that correct, Elizabeth McDonald?
That is correct.
Okay. So can I jump in at this point? I'm a bit surprised because I thought we were going to deal with Sayo's issue. Which is blue-green algae at this meeting. Are we not?
So Sayo's issue, I sent out an email to him, and we thought it would be most appropriate after we reviewed it at the agenda review that it go directly to the Environment Sustainability Standing Committee, and that he submitted his correspondence to that standing committee.
I see. So we're not going to talk about it at all?
That was our recommendation, was that it goes as correspondence to the standing committee. Correct. I don't know if Sayo can speak to that, if he ended up submitting that as correspondence to that committee or not.
I see.
Yeah, so I'm trying to raise awareness on this issue, and the severity of the issue, the fact that it's a cumulative problem, the fact that it's increasing all the time, the fact that we need some solid policy and regulations and public education now. I spent yesterday looking at the regional plan and looking through that because I'd heard that it has has pertinent information on that and future plans. That's all great. The vision is great, but we need action now. I think I would like to propose an action plan. It's in draft form right now, and I would like to bring it to this committee when it's mature. I also would like to bring it forward to whatever committees will listen at the HRM, at the provincial level, because I think it's necessary, and it's certainly very wrong of the province to be saying that this is simply a naturally occurring phenomenon and leaving it at that. It's the worst of all sort of worlds that we're in, and it's completely out of step with anywhere else in the world. So I'm on a mission. The first stop on the mission didn't happen to be here today, but I'm sure we will in some way find ways to engage this board in that.
Thank you for the update.
Mr. Vice Chair, I just want to jump in here because I watched Elizabeth Montgomery in the media. Watched means read. She made a very nice presentation to the Oat Hill Lake Conservation Society, and she handled that about blue greens and about benthic and pelagic. So we have an expert right here, you know, so maybe she should speak sometime.
Thank you. I'm hardly an expert, but I am working on it. So we're and yeah, when we're ready, when Sayo's ready to bring this to the board, we can discuss. But based on the points he was making, we felt that he could go straight to ESSC, like Elizabeth MacDonald said.
And I think as far as bringing items forward to this board, I will defer to our chair when he is available, and with our excellent staff members to make sure that it does come forward at the appropriate time. But it sounds like it's in development now, and there's a mature product on the horizon, and I think that will be an excellent discussion to have at that time. Okay, so the date of the next meeting, October 12th. There was an expression of interest from Shalom to meet earlier to perform introductions to the committee. I will defer to our excellent staff in terms of any kind of proposals to change in schedule. I will mention from a personal point of view that moving things earlier may be difficult for those who have to come from a job to this. That could make it untenable in terms of participating. And I think that the 5 o'clock hour is selected fairly intentionally for that perspective. So perhaps we could consider adding an item to the next agenda that is more fulsome introductions. Although I do appreciate that everybody spent a few seconds introducing their own personal backgrounds today. So maybe if we expand on that next time, that might be sufficient.
If I can jump in here, this is what Elizabeth MacDonald sent me an email. Sue Belford was also a member of our board. She used to work for Jake's Environmental. I remember her, and she wanted to do that too, right? Sue Belford?
Sue had mentioned meeting informally, I believe, outside of the board, outside of official board meetings. Just whoever could make it somewhere, sometime, meet informally and kind of get to know each other a little bit better.
I like to do that because we're working from home anyway. It's not as if we have to go 100 miles. Well, I'm ready for that.
So I'm not sure what the planning process for something like that would look like, but I assume that it's outside of the purvey of staff's support of the board.
That is correct. Yeah.
Right. So I would suggest that we all have one another's email addresses, and perhaps if somebody wanted to spearhead that, then that would be something that they could propose to the other members of the board, and outside of the normal activities of the board is probably. That's the social get-together that sounds very appropriate to me in terms of actually having a face-to-face with people we've been staring at on a screen for a year or more. but
this board, I don't know
yeah.
how long, Mr. Vice Chair, you have been a member. This board used to meet at the Harbor East Community Council room down at the Alderney Gate. You know, I used to attend meetings just to watch because you're not allowed to talk unless you're a member. So I really enjoyed listening to people.
Yes, and there was an email that went around a while ago that discussed the possibility of returning to an in-person format. But it was, I believe, by majority that members indicated that they preferred this format. And I would strongly suspect that that was due to just logistical constraints of everybody getting to one place at 5 o'clock on a Thursday.
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah.
The majority of members that we polled said that virtual would work better. There were a few that said they'd be open to either virtual or in person, but the vast majority said their preference was virtual.
Okay, I'm going to jump in quickly. I have the addresses of everybody. Remember, Elizabeth McDonald, when you send invitations, you can see everybody's email address there.
Yep.
I think I'm going to suggest that we meet virtually. You know, then I can have a coffee or a bottle of wine or something, and we can meet virtually outside, because I find this board, and this is a critique. I'm not used to this kind of very tight terms of reference, because I used to chair boards, you know, for the municipality, and it was very much loose. And if Professor Martin Willison, I like to address him as Willison, if he remembers, it was very informal. You know, even though you and I weren't on the same board, you know, you were on the Lakes and Waterways Committee, I believe, right?
Correct.
Yeah. There's no point in being too serious, you know, we got to be informal. Anyway, I'm going to suggest that I'll send an email to everybody and see how many people.
I look forward to that email, Shalom, and I'm sure everybody else does as well. And perhaps we can find a time to socialize outside of our Thursday evenings.
Pick a pub, Shalom, and just invite them.
Look, it's only 6 p.m. now. We still have 1 hour, you know, officially. And I just want to do this. When I was a member of the Halifax Watershed Board, I know the terms of reference have changed radically. As Elizabeth McDonald said, she sent me an email on that. We used to be minimum 3 hours, sometimes 5 hours at the county building. And everybody was from everywhere around. The chairman, Dr. Stobo, he was from Fall River. So we used to meet in person. So working from home is not a big deal. Anyway, I'm going to send that email in a very informal way.
Thank you very much, Shalom. Sayo, your hand is up.
Yeah, I like the pub idea. It'll have to happen after September 15th. Right now, I'm at the cottage in Gatineau. And you've outdone me. You're camping, so that's pretty amazing. So yeah, the pub idea is great. I also want to raise the possibility that we could have a mixed meeting. We could have people who meet in person and offer the option of joining in online. I don't see why that would be a problem, but on balance, the pub sounds better.
Well, thank you very much. I also enjoy that notion. And perhaps that's a topic for discussion, the idea of a mixed meeting with our chair and with our legislative assistant in terms of the potential formats. So the next meeting is October 12th, 2023. That is our last item on the agenda. So with that, we hit adjournments. So I believe I need someone simply to move for adjournment and then go ahead. All right, Shalom moves, and therefore this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Good discussion there on a couple of points, and I'm looking forward to seeing those develop further and other points brought forward continue to develop as well.
Good job.
Thank you for chairing, David.
My pleasure. Beautiful